What happened when an undercover CEO walked into a struggling seaside inn and a humble desk clerk offered him a room for free without knowing who he really was? Welcome back, thoughtful listeners. Your love for stories that celebrate dignity, integrity, and second chances is what keeps this channel thriving. Today's story is about quiet courage, the power of unseen kindness, and how one simple gesture reshaped an entire company. If you've ever believed that true character shines brightest when no one's watching, this story is for you. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired by what happens next. The salty breeze of Seabreeze Point drifted through the cracked windows of the Driftwood Inn, rustling faded curtains and carrying with it the scent of old wood and distant waves. Behind the weathered front desk stood Lila Brooks, 28, her smile warm and practiced despite the exhaustion tugging at her eyes. Her uniform, ironed the night before, clung to her like armor, a threadbare badge of quiet resilience. The morning rush had faded, leaving only the ticking of the lobby clock and the soft creak of sun-warped floorboards. For Lila, this inn wasn't just a job, it was her battleground and her sanctuary. 3 years ago, she'd dropped out of her hospitality degree to care for her father after a debilitating stroke. Since then, her life had been an unending cycle of caregiving, clocking in and patching holes both literal and metaphorical in the hotel walls and her own sense of self. The Driftwood Inn had seen better days. Guests still came for the ocean view, but the charm was fading, carpets frayed at the edges, light fixtures flickering, and the once popular cafe now serving reheated pastries. Still, Lila poured herself into the work, offering a kind word, a strong cup of coffee, and small touches of grace that management overlooked. Though the owners had changed hands recently, the staff had been left to run on autopilot. Most came to work. Lila came to care. She checked in tourists with sunburns and business travelers with short tempers, all while worrying about her father's medication refills and whether she could stretch her paycheck past Friday. As she filed room keys into the outdated logbook, the bell above the door jingled. Lila turned, her smile ready, her posture upright despite the aching in her lower back. She had mastered the art of appearing calm when everything inside her felt frayed. At that moment, no one in the room could have guessed that the woman behind the counter was holding her life together with nothing more than threadbare hope and muscle memory. And yet, her smile held, soft, genuine, unwavering, because even on the edge of collapse, Lila believed something simple and powerful, that kindness mattered, even when no one seemed to notice, especially then. The sun was already slipping behind the horizon when the front door creaked open again. A tall, older man stepped inside the Driftwood Inn, his shoulders slightly hunched beneath a faded army green jacket. He looked like he had walked a long road. His boots were worn, his beard untrimmed, and his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. Lila glanced up from the desk, immediately noticing the stiffness in his gait and the way he scanned the lobby like someone unfamiliar with comfort. He hesitated at the counter, then spoke in a voice low and hoarse, asking if there might be a room available just for the night. Lila offered a warm smile and typed into the ancient booking system, quoting him the lowest weekday rate they could legally offer. But as he patted down his pockets and looked inside a battered wallet, the truth became clear. He didn't have the money. There was a pause. Lila could feel Trina's watchful eyes through the glass of the back office. The company policy was strict. No unpaid guests, no exceptions. But politicians didn't know what it meant to be tired and broke. People did. And Lila, who had once spent a night on a hospital bench when she couldn't afford a motel near her father's treatment center, understood that look in the man's eyes. So she made a quiet decision. "Don't worry about the payment tonight," she said softly. "We'll settle it tomorrow. Or not at all. You look like you need more rest than receipts." The man blinked in surprise, his expression unreadable for a moment, then he nodded slowly, gratitude flickering across his face. Lila handed him a key to room 4, one of the few with a window that looked out at the water and a heater that still worked. She also slipped him a voucher for breakfast in the morning, writing "house guest" in careful script so the kitchen staff wouldn't charge him. Brent, the bellhop, saw the exchange and scoffed under his breath, muttering something about charity cases. But Lila paid no attention. She walked the man to the hallway, pointing out where the coffee station would be in the morning, making sure he knew how to use the old room key, and even offering a spare toothbrush from the front desk drawer. She returned to her post quietly, never expecting anything in return. To her, it wasn't a grand act. It was just the right thing to do, a gesture born from decency, not calculation. What she couldn't have known was that the guest she had treated with such quiet dignity had seen every detail, and that for him, the night's stay would be restful, but far from forgettable. The next few days at Driftwood Inn passed with their usual rhythm. Leaky faucets, forgotten wake-up calls, and guests asking for extra towels right as Lila clocked out. But beneath the normalcy, something uneasy stirred. Trina Morales, the hotel manager, had grown increasingly sharp, her clipped words and watchful eyes more pointed than usual. Lila noticed it most when she paused to help a guest with a stroller, or offered a complimentary bottle of water to a sunburned couple checking in late. "We're not a charity, Leela," Trina would mutter with a tight smile, always just loud enough for others to hear. Brent, the bellhop with slick-back hair and a smug smirk, chimed in frequently, rolling his eyes whenever Lila stayed late to help Joe unclog a backed-up sink or walk an elderly guest to their room after dark. What they called overdoing it, Lila simply saw as the right way to treat people. One slow afternoon, Leela stepped into the back corridor for her 10-minute break and paused outside the half-closed door to the supply room. Inside, she heard Brent and Trina talking and then laughing. "Did you see her last night?" Brent scoffed. "Giving a room away like we're running a soup kitchen?" Trina snorted. "She thinks compassion pays the bills. No wonder she's stuck here, still living in that rundown apartment with her sick dad." Leela froze. The words hit harder than she expected, not because they were wrong, but because they were so carelessly accurate. She hadn't told anyone about her father's latest setback. The only time she'd mentioned his condition was in her HR file, asking for schedule flexibility around his physical therapy sessions. Hearing it repeated like gossip felt like a violation. She stood in silence, her hand clenched around the break room doorknob. Every instinct screamed for her to walk in, confront them, defend her choices, her life. But she didn't. Instead, she turned away, her steps slow and steady as she returned to the front desk. There were guests arriving soon, and she still had to prepare the morning shift logs. If she'd slammed the door, it might have made a point, but Leela wasn't interested in points, she was interested in doing her job well. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that a tiny black security camera had just shifted slightly in the corner of the supply room ceiling, capturing every word and every sneer. And far from the Driftwood Inn, in a quiet beachfront suite, the man she had helped only nights ago had just clicked play. Across town, in a sunlit suite overlooking Seabreeze Point's rocky coastline, Henry Carrington sat at a sleek glass desk, his expression calm but focused. The rugged man who had checked into Driftwood Inn days earlier, unshaven, slouched, and quiet, was gone. In his place was a composed, sharply dressed executive with decades of business acumen behind his eyes. 3 laptops were open in front of him, each displaying security footage from different hotels under his brand. But his attention was fixed on one screen, the Driftwood feed. He watched as Lila Brooks returned to the front desk, shoulders tense, eyes focused, after overhearing cruel gossip not meant for her ears. He had already seen the footage of her offering him a free room without hesitation, speaking to him like a person, not a burden. But this moment of restraint, of professionalism in the face of humiliation, struck him even harder. Henry wasn't just any CEO. Driftwood Inn had been one of his first acquisitions under the Carrington Resorts Revival Project, a chain once known for warmth and service, now riddled with apathy and decay. He had decided long ago that spreadsheets could only tell part of the story. To rebuild the brand, he had to see with his own eyes what was happening on the ground, without fanfare, without title. So he'd gone undercover, and what he'd seen in Layla Brooks wasn't just kindness, it was character. While reviewing employee records, he found what he expected: 3 years of flawless attendance, dozens of guest compliments, no disciplinary notes, yet not a single promotion or pay increase beyond standard cost of living adjustments. Meanwhile, Trina Morales had climbed the ladder quickly, despite a string of staff complaints and turnover numbers that should have raised red flags. Henry leaned back, tapping notes into his tablet. L. Burks, empathy-driven leadership, high guest loyalty potential. Next to Trina's name, he typed, promoted for efficiency, no emotional intelligence, breach of confidentiality. His jaw tightened slightly as he reviewed Brent's file. Guest complaints, tip manipulation, and disciplinary warnings buried in the system. This wasn't just bad management, it was cultural rot. And it was costing him more than profits. It was costing the company its soul. Henry glanced at the driftwood camera feed again, watching Lila refill a guest's coffee as if nothing had happened. The decision was clear. Monday would not be business as usual. It would be the beginning of something long overdue. The morning air felt unusually still as staff trickled into the Driftwood Inn, their chatter muted by the handwritten sign on the front door, closed for staff meeting until 11 o'clock IMM. Lila stood near the coffee station, pouring herself a cup with a hand that trembled slightly. She hadn't slept well, the memory of overheard gossip still fresh in her mind. Across the lobby, Trina Morales stood with her arms crossed, clipboard in hand, her signature red lipstick perfectly applied. Brent leaned against the check-in counter, cracking jokes with another employee, clearly unconcerned. Rumors buzzed, corporate cuts, new owners, performance audits, but no one knew what was coming. When Trina finally called the room to order, her voice was smug. Corporate has sent a representative to discuss upcoming restructuring, she announced. Please welcome Mr. Martin from Carrington Resorts. The man who stepped out from the office wasn't the mild, weary traveler from a few nights ago. He was clean-shaven, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, and carried himself with quiet command. But Lila recognized him instantly. Her breath caught. He gave her a subtle nod before facing the staff. Good morning, he began. Before we begin, I should correct one small detail. My name isn't Mr. Martin. I'm Henry Carrington, CEO of Carrington Resorts, and the new owner of this property. Gasps rippled through the room. Trina's eyes widened. Brent dropped the pen he'd been fiddling with. Lila froze, unsure what to think or feel. Over the past 2 months, Henry continued, I've been visiting each of our coastal properties, undercover, to experience what our guests experience and, more importantly, to observe what kind of culture we've built when no one thinks they're being watched. His voice was calm but purposeful. I came here not as a CEO, but as someone who needed a place to rest. What I received wasn't just a room, it was dignity. And what I observed, well, we'll get to that shortly. The staff stood in stunned silence, waiting. Lila's heart pounded. She had no idea what he would say next, whether she'd be praised or reprimanded, whether he'd see her gesture as noble or naive. All she knew was that the world had just shifted under her feet, and the man she'd once handed a room key to was now holding the future of the entire hotel, and her place within it in his hands. The reckoning had arrived, and no one would leave untouched. Henry Carrington moved toward the laptop stationed near the counter, tapping a few keys. The lobby lights dimmed slightly as a projector cast its glow across the far wall. Before I discuss my decisions, he said, I want to show you what influenced them. The room fell into a tense silence as grainy but clear security footage began to roll. On screen, the familiar setting of the Driftwood Inn's lobby appeared, timetabled, from a few nights earlier. There was Lila behind the desk, calmly greeting the disheveled man and offering him a warm smile. The staff watched as she gently handed over a room key and slipped him a breakfast voucher, her voice steady and kind. She didn't know she was being recorded. She had no reason to think her actions would ever be noticed. The footage continued. Clips showed Lila carrying extra towels for a young mother juggling 2 toddlers, checking in a couple late at night with an exhausted courtesy and compassion that never looked forced. Then came the birthday muffin, 1 candle lit, a small girl beaming with joy as Lila sang softly and brought it to the breakfast table, entirely unprompted. Henry paused the video. This is what hospitality looks like when no one's watching, he said. This is what creates loyalty more than marketing or renovations ever could. Then the projection changed. The supply room appeared, camera angle shifted downward to capture Trina and Brent's private conversation. The staff stiffened. The timestamp matched Lila's break 2 days earlier. Henry pressed play. Trina's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. She thinks compassion pays the bills. Still living in that dump with her sick dad? Brent laughed, echoing her cruelty. Probably used her rent money to cover that guy's stay. Classic bleeding heart. The effect was instant. A wave of discomfort spread through the staff. Lila sat frozen, every word landing like a slap. Her secret, her struggle, mocked in the back hallway like idle gossip. Henry let the footage play a few seconds longer, then stopped it and turned to face the room. "What you just saw is not leadership," he said coldly. "It's a violation of trust, of professionalism, and of basic decency." Trina stood stiff, her face pale. Brent looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector and the surf rolling faintly outside. The mood had shifted. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a reckoning. And Lila, once dismissed as too soft, was no longer invisible. The truth had a face now, and the room would never see her the same way again. Henry let the silence settle like dust after a storm, giving the weight of what had just been shown time to fully sink in. Then he turned back toward the staff, eyes steady, voice calm but unwavering. "Driftwood Inn isn't just struggling because of age or outdated decor," he said. "It's struggling because we've lost the values that once made places like this special. Kindness, integrity, and care. And that changes today." He turned first to Brent, who sat with arms crossed, his earlier cockiness erased. "Mr. Nolan, over the last 2 weeks I've reviewed guest complaints, observed your interactions, and verified multiple violations, including guest disrespect, food safety issues, and time card manipulation." Brent opened his mouth, but Henry raised a hand. "This is not up for debate. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will assist you with collecting your belongings." Brent's face fell as a ripple of unease moved through the room. Henry didn't pause. He looked next to Trina, who stood stiff, chin lifted in fading defiance. "Ms. Morales, your leadership style, focused purely on numbers and control, has fostered a culture of intimidation, ridicule, and high staff turnover. However, your operational knowledge is extensive, and I believe in second chances. You have a choice. Accept a probationary reassignment as a front desk clerk with mandatory ethics retraining and performance reviews, or take a severance package and resign today." Trina's face flushed a deep red. She hesitated, visibly struggling, then finally muttered, "Probation. For now." Then Henry turned to Lila. "Miss Brooks, please stand." Lila rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly, eyes wide with disbelief. "You've demonstrated what true leadership looks like, not through authority, but through action. You treat every guest with dignity, you lift up your coworkers, you serve with consistency, empathy, and quiet strength." He reached for a folder and handed it to her. "I'd like to offer you the position of assistant manager, effective immediately. This comes with a 50% salary increase, full health coverage, including for your father's medical needs, and a flexible schedule that accommodates his care." The room fell silent again, but this time the tension was different. It was reverent, respectful. Lila looked down at the offer in her hands, tears threatening, but her voice steady. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't think anyone noticed." Henry smiled. "We noticed, and the future of this place begins with people like you." A quiet applause began from Joe in the back, then spread through the staff like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Driftwood Inn was changing, and so was Lila's life. The transition from front desk clerk to assistant manager happened quickly, but for Lila Brooks, it didn't feel like a promotion, it felt like a calling. By the next morning, her old badge was gone, replaced by a new one etched with assistant manager beneath her name. But more than the title, it was the way her coworkers looked at her that had changed. The skeptical glances had softened. Even those who had once kept their distance now sought her advice or offered to lend a hand. Lila didn't gloat, didn't lead with authority, she led by example. She started by fixing what she knew best, the guest experience. She reorganized the front desk to make check-ins smoother, added fresh flowers from a local vendor to the lobby counter, and suggested a complimentary coffee cart by the entrance in the mornings. Small changes, but ones that felt like care. More importantly, she began scheduling one-on-one meetings with every staff member, not to reprimand, but to listen. Joe, the maintenance head, teared up when she asked him what tools he'd been waiting 6 months to get. Maria from housekeeping told her she hadn't had a day off in 2 weeks. Lila adjusted shifts, ensured breaks were enforced, and made clear to everyone that dignity wasn't optional, it was policy now. Even Trina, still adjusting to her probationary role, began to thaw. Lila didn't humiliate her or hold grudges. Instead, she treated her like a teammate, offering guidance and structure without judgment. That quiet grace had a ripple effect. People began to show up early again. Laughter returned to the hallways. A few days later, Lila returned home after a long shift to find her father sitting up with a faint smile, holding the insurance paperwork she had left on the kitchen table. "So, you're management now?" he asked, his voice thin but proud. "Something like that," Lila replied, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She sat beside him, her hand finding his. For the first time in years, her chest didn't feel heavy. The weight of survival had been replaced by something lighter. Purpose. Back at the inn, a fresh coat of paint was being applied to the once faded lobby walls. A welcome sign, hand-drawn by a local student, now hung behind the desk. Driftwood Inn was becoming something new again, not because of a renovation budget, but because a woman who had once felt invisible was now redefining the culture from the inside out. And she wasn't done yet. The sea was calm that morning, the breeze gentle as it rolled in from the shore, whispering against the glass doors of the Driftwood Inn. Lila stood behind the front desk, now fully comfortable in her new role, organizing check-in packets with a rhythm that had become second nature. The inn felt different, brighter, warmer, alive. Staff passed one another with smiles instead of side eyes, guests lingered longer in the lobby, and the once distant hum of burnout had quieted. Just after noon, the door swung open, and in walked Henry Carrington. Not in disguise this time, but as himself. A tailored blazer, confident stride, but the same eyes that had once scanned the lobby with quiet fatigue. Lila looked up and smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Carrington," she said, her voice light. "Checking in?" he chuckled. "Just passing through. Wanted to see how the place was doing." His eyes scanned the space, noting the flower arrangement on the counter, the fresh paint, and the way Maria from housekeeping greeted a guest with ease and pride. "Looks like I chose the right hands," he added. They sat for a few minutes in the small lounge. Henry asked about her father, and Lila beamed as she shared that his treatment had begun the week before, fully covered, stress-free. "He says I walk taller now," she added, a little shyly. Henry nodded, his expression sincere. "You should. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that the heart of hospitality isn't policy or revenue projections. It's people. It's showing up with decency when no one's watching. You gave me a room, Lila, but what you really gave me was a reason to believe this company could still be what it once was." As he stood to leave, he turned back one last time. "We're launching a new initiative, company-wide staff mentorships. I'd like you to lead it. Share what you know, teach what you do naturally. We don't need more managers, we need more leaders like you." Lila nodded, overwhelmed but ready. She watched as he walked out the door, disappearing into the sunlight, and as she turned back toward the front desk, her fingers brushing the edge of her new name tag, she whispered the words that had always guided her, now more true than ever. "Be kind, especially when no one's watching, because sometimes someone is, and sometimes they change everything." The story of Lila Brooks at the Driftwood Inn teaches a timeless and powerful lesson. Kindness is never wasted, especially when it's unseen. In a world that often rewards ambition, efficiency, and outward appearances, Lila's quiet compassion and integrity became the very qualities that transformed not only her own life, but the entire culture of her workplace. She didn't offer a free room to impress anyone. She did it because it was the right thing to do. And that simple, selfless act became the catalyst for sweeping change. The story reminds us that true leadership isn't about titles or authority. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is looking. For mature audiences, especially those who've spent a lifetime navigating careers, families, and responsibilities, it resonates deeply. It reaffirms the value of empathy, humility, and grace under pressure. Lila's journey from overlooked clerk to respected leader shows that doing the right thing may not always bring instant rewards, but over time it builds trust, loyalty, and legacy. In the end, the lesson is clear. When character meets opportunity, everything changes. And sometimes it takes just one moment of kindness to open every door.